Hello everybody, welcome to Toward a Quality of Life, another session here at the Roxbury studio of BNN TV, your Boston Neighborhood Network television station. And thank you for tuning in. Today, you know, I've been doing a lot of politics in my shows lately because I am very concerned on the political status of our country. However, another of my themes, which has been side-railed in the interim, is the environment, although I am very much against cap and trade. But you know that I am a heart and soul environmentalist for many years and have brought you many, many lectures on the environment, which is in very difficult condition and getting worse all the time. I won't get into why, but I do want to say before I speak that cap and trade is absolutely not in order for helping our environmental ills. But we can certainly become much more aware of all the pollution we're throwing out in many kinds of ways and all the chemicals and poisons and toxins that are killing us and causing cancer to so many people, causing us to be in a very difficult environmental condition, to be sure. And it's not only cancer, but look at how much asthma there is, heart defects, premature babies, babies born with terrible diseases like we've never seen. Why is that happening? Birth defects, diabetes, which has many causes, but some of them can be from environmental elements of chemistry that go into our bodies, and certainly stress, and stress is part of the whole environmental problem. Multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, dementia, the list goes on. And boy, who among us does not know people who have had cancer of the most egregious kind, suffered terribly, either made it through some very difficult ordeals of treatment, so to speak, or didn't make it through and suffered very harrowing sentences of suffering before they died. This is getting way out of hand, and reasonable people, rather than listening to commercials on television about healthcare centers spoken in soft, soothing tones to the listener of promising, in effect, if you go there, how beautiful your life will be, how you'll carry on a regular life, and how they will heal you. What absurdities. Instead of that, when we get cancer or see people who have cancer, we ought to be saying, why are we and our children suffering the cancers that we are? And why are the animals and the fish suffering cancers that they are? This brings me, I'm going to talk about fish today. So these are reasons of why the environment, and also you just want to have a clean, pretty, nice environment to live in. It's not good for you materially, spiritually, existentially to not have a good environment. And today I'm going to talk about a few things. One of them is about fish and fish farming, fish depletion. And speaking of cancer, it comes to my mind that many years ago, I knew someone whose mother, he said, worked in the New Bedford canneries and fish harvesting places after the fish come in off the boats, where they cut them for, for commercial purposes and get them prepared. And he was telling me that even back then, and this was quite a few years ago, his mother was telling him that the fish come in with a lot of cancer. When they cut them open, the innards are full of cancer, and those fish were still used, the flesh of them, essentially the muscles and so on, was still used as commercial product. But even many years ago, it was pretty bad for fish. And I think, come to think of it too, I think there are so many things to tell you about this. The list goes on and on and on of how many derangements and wrong kind of patterns and biologies gone awry in the ocean and in the world at large. The list just goes on forever, and I could stand here and talk forever about how many things should be pointed out to explain how difficult it is. Now, regarding fish that are sold in the grocery stores for your consumption, and to the restaurants for that matter, 70% of the fish that we need to eat is already depleted, gone, 70%. And a Whole Foods person in the fish department told me that their people are being told that within 10 years the fish will be totally gone. That is to say, free-swimming fish. And you know, in this country, fish is widely consumed, but it's not the protein that people depend on to survive. However, there are countries where fish is the protein that people depend on to survive. So it's even more threatening in areas where fish are a diet staple. So now 70% are depleted. And by the way, when fish are being sought by the boats and fishermen that go out to sea to catch them and bring them back to shore, a lot of times they're using the big trawling nets, where they catch everything in the wake of the nets, and this includes turtles, and as you've heard, dolphins, and many kinds of sea creatures that are not going to be eaten or used, and they get killed along the way. So the devastation to the ocean and to the planet from the techniques of fishing also, in addition to that we're using so much of the edible fish, are causing great amounts of death and extinction and entropy to be happening, even for sort of a useless reason, if you will. There are even instances many times where fish are found by using explosives in the water, and then everything that gets exploded floats to the top and is dead, much of it not even what's going to be consumed by we humans. And so, given this situation with the fish being depleted, we're now seeing farm-raised fish. And of course, if you've been in the grocery store shopping for fish, you may have noticed on the labels that some are called farm-raised. In fact, most are called farm-raised. And when you get something like a salmon that is labeled wild, you're going to pay significantly more for it than for the salmon that is farm-raised. And while I'm thinking of salmon, by the way, I was told that the fish food used on farm-raised salmon does not end up in their color being that salmon color pink-red that you normally know is the salmon color. So additives of coloring, in addition to what I'm going to be talking about, are put into the farm-raised salmon to make them look more normal of what we were used to from wild-caught salmon. And there are many issues with salmon, too. As you know, it's a very sad story. They don't have the water in the West, for example, to be swimming and going where they need to go to do all the stages of their life cycle and be the plentiful, bountiful fish that both we and animals can eat. We are animals too, by the way. Lest anyone be worried, we are animals. I could give a lecture on that. And I don't mean we're animals that we give paw and speak, although sometimes we might do that effectively, figuratively too. But we are animals. We're instinctual. We scratch. We urinate. We defecate. We have hunger. We have very instinctual biological patterns where we're just kind of like animals. There are some more human things about us too, per se, but a lot about us is very animalistic. Now, so these 50% of the fish are raised in so-called fish farms, and there are different kinds of fish farms. And the thing about them, generally speaking, is that the fish are very much more crowded because they're contained by some means within a space. And, of course, they eliminate their waste products, and those waste products are in with the rest of the fish. And then there's the food that's given to them, which is, if it's not all consumed, it's floating in there too. And this stuff pollutes the rest of the water that these containers are in with these fish. And also, due to the fact that the fish are so crowded with each other, unlike what they would be in the free ocean, there's a lot more disease and infection. And so because of that, the fish are given antibiotics. So you've got extra medicines that are not good for you going into these farm-raised fish. And of course, these disease and infection and antibiotics also pollute the rest of the environment because there's an exchange with the water around it. Most fish cannot be farmed in containers that are separated from whole water systems. Now, also, many chemicals are used. A lot of these fish come from countries other than our own, and if you see in the grocery store not only farm-raised, it will often mention Vietnam, China, and you're like Thailand. You're like, whoa! And imagine, too, while we think of it, the shipping costs to maintain refrigerated frozen fish to come so far away from the world, where probably the people there need it more than we do, which is a whole other issue. But chemicals can be used in these countries that are banned in this country, and they're in those fish that we are so often importing from other areas. And another thing is when the nets are in the open waters, a net system for containing these fish, predators will try to get at the fish, and they'll break the nets. That'll also cause them, the fish themselves, to be released. Not only their waste product and the antibiotic and all that, but the fish themselves will be released. Storms can also cause damage and make these pens open up, and the fish will be released. And then they contaminate because this is a gene pool that's very queer and unusual, and they contaminate the gene pool of the wild fish that are in the water as these fish escape, and they compete with the food and territories for mating with the rest of the fish, and they spread their disease into the ocean. So it's a vicious cycle. Now, you might have noticed that there seems to be a new fish on the scene that we normally didn't see in our stores before, and that fish is called tilapia. I don't think I care for it too much. I think I had it once, but it's very common. And the reason for that probably is that this is one of the easier fishes to contain without having to be in the broad water system. They are able to contain these fish in large tanks and still have them grow and apparently reproduce and so on. And another good thing about these fish, unlike others, unlike the salmon, for example, is that they are herbivores. In other words, they eat plankton and I don't know what they eat in these containers where they're artificially fed. They're not eating the natural things of the ocean, but they do eat plant life rather than animal life. And so you see that tilapia is becoming very much the fish that you're seeing in the grocery store. So of all the fishes, but the salmon, on the other hand, which cannot be grown this way, and most fish cannot be grown that way, they're in pens where these issues with the exchange in the waters around them is happening, and with the problems of disease. I'm sure the disease is also an issue on this tilapia being in a containment. After all, they're swimming in their own waste products. I'm sure all the things I mentioned regarding unconsumed feed and having to get antibiotics, I'm sure that's all in there. Now, another one that is least degrading to the environment, though still not healthy, and you can really taste the difference. These are called bivalves, the mussels and the oysters. I don't know how clams do. Clams are very delicate creatures, and I used to love steamed clams. Probably some of you do too. I like mussels as well. But one day, not long ago, I had some mussels at a restaurant that, without knowing, apparently were wild. And all of a sudden, I said, wow, whoa, I remembered the flavor. What a difference in taste. And if you'll notice, the mussels now, too, are little shrinky things oftentimes. They're not nice and plump inside the shell. But anyway, they too are one of the least problematic to cultivate in so-called farmed fish, because, or farmed seafood, I should say, because they're filters. You know, people sometimes say don't eat them even when they're in the ocean, because they filter out all the crud and crap in the ocean. And if you look at steamed clams, steamers, which are very expensive now, relatively, and not always available, there are sometimes not clams to be sold even, but they might be full of oil, and you'll see rust sort of on them. They filter all this stuff. That's the nature. And they don't move around. They stay still, so they don't have the problem of them needing to swim or anything. And so actually, because they filter a lot of their own waste, and they can be contained much more so by not moving, and they clean the water. So those two, the tilapia and the bivalves. But be aware that the fish that you're eating, all the other kinds of fish, unless it says wild caught, and who knows if that's always the truth, are in these congested, environmentally unsound, and medically unhealthy systems for you to be consuming them and putting them into your body. But this is the world we're inheriting. Now, fish just from the regular ocean are not that healthy either. You've certainly heard all the reports about mercury. And mercury, by the way, even though we had it in thermometers, and even though it's in our fluorescent lights, and there's a little bit of it in these new low energy bulbs that we're all changing over to now, and it's been in the fillings of our teeth, in the amalgams, mercury is very, very toxic to the human body, and especially to the human mind. Now, it's always a matter of concentrations, but mercury is not something that we should be getting into our system. And there is a significant mercury in the waters around the world. And this mercury, which comes from industry and so forth, I won't describe here how it gets to be there, but it's in the fish, and it's especially in tuna, and other I can't remember which other fishes. Some of them have more concentrations. And the bigger the fish, what happens is, as the bigger fish eats the little fish, and the bigger one than that eats that one, and so forth, up the food chain, the concentrations of the toxins, like mercury and other things that are in the water, get more and more and go into your body, and who knows what harm they are doing there. So I wanted to make you aware environmentally of what kind of fish situation we are experiencing on this planet Earth. And that has nothing to do with cap and trade. That has nothing to do with carbon taxes, which is a subject unto itself for a whole other time. Now, I was going to also talk to you about bees today, bees that I love, and I see that my time, while not ended yet, is rather short, and this subject will take more minutes than I have left. So I think I'll leave that aside, but I would like you to realize now, as the bees come out, what little is left of bees that we need so vitally, that you respect them and you notice them and you see how wonderful they are, and watch and be aware of what is going on around you environmentally, not just the computer screen that you are stuck to with your eyes focused stationarily, rarely blinking, rarely refocusing to other lengths of distance and so on, causing your vision to ruin, as I must do so very often. I can't beat it. I have to join it. I am in the computer age as well. But, you know, hurting your vision, hurting your posture, hurting your back, and also getting your daily dose of radiation, just in case you don't have enough from all the other extraneous sources that are so very not good to the human body. So in the last few minutes, I will try to quickly go through something else environmentally that might be curious and interesting to you, and that is the new car smell. I remember people I knew who used to say, "Oh, smell that new car smell." And I don't care for it myself, and I also don't care for the perfumes that dealers use when they clean cars or detailers use. They're not good for you. They're not good for your lungs. Those molecules sit on sites in your lungs that prevent you from breathing properly. And they interfere with the function of the lungs. But be that as it may, in new cars, there are plastics and cloths, the textiles of the seats, on the dashboard and so forth, all around on the consoles, whatever, that contain really deadly metals. Including and elements, not elements, but chemistry that goes into the plastics of which they are made. And those metals, you may know them or not, are antimony, bromine, chlorine, lead, and so forth, and plastics, which you may see Say No to Plastic here on the screen. Definitely say no to plastic. This smell actually is doing you harm. The chemicals in this new car smell, the ethers coming off these plastics and parts, cause birth defects, impair your mind to be able to learn, cause toxicity to your liver, and cancer. And so you're breathing this in, and when these chemicals heat up, they are even stronger in the ether or the air of the car. And, you know, I was myself thinking one day, how come when I had a new car, how come the inside of the windows were fogged up as though someone were smoking? And I don't smoke, nor did anyone in my car. And guess what? These ethers fog the window. In the beginning, when everything is new and they're giving off their ethers, they fog the interior of your windows. And that's because they evaporate and then condense onto the window, especially in high temperatures. And then when we get rid of the cars, these chemicals go into landfills usually. Yes, I know that I'm ready to wrap. I was going to 210. That's right. Okay, and then they end up in the environment, and we've got more bad chemistry around us. I've been given the signal to go, so I will say good night to you, but please try to remember these things and be aware of your environment around you, especially the animals and life, and thank you very much.
It's fun and it's warm.